Good evening. Today is February 5th, 2022, and we are in the 65th week of the communist insurrection here in the U.S. with President Joe Biden at the helm.
Right, a shaky, helm, but
nonetheless at the helm. Now, I don't know how many decisions he actually makes on his own, which I would suspect would be very few.
Well, I mean, they won't even let him, answer questions at a press conference.
Well, that's right.
They pull him off like,
it's embarrassing, really.
Like, what was the guy's name that ran the Gong Show? With the big hook,
that does remind me of that from time
well,
to time.
It does. I'm dating myself a bit because that's a reference back to a show in the late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah, 70s, 80s, somewhere in that time frame.
Something, was it Richard Barris?
Art Barris, something like
anyway,
that. Richard, maybe, I don't know.
It was basically a talent show where people would get up there and if
people with no talent.
Right. If they weren't very good, if they had nothing to offer, they quickly were pulled off stage. And the gong would go off and the hook would come out and they'd get pulled off to the side. It often seems like there's somebody virtually doing that with Joe Biden every time he speaks.
Every time. Every time. Now, we are constantly deluged with talk about democracy. There's a January 6th commission to study the effects of the violent insurrection in Washington on January 6th, the threat to our democracy.
Right, the phrase du jour being our democracy. That seems to be the little moniker they're using right now. Yeah.
Now, what really infuriates me is when individuals who know better continue to repeat that talking point, and Tucker Carlson did so the other night. And it flabbergasts me, number one, because I know he knows better.
Right.
I know he knows that this is not a democracy.
Right.
And that democracies always end poorly.
They end in tyranny. Well, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, both on the show and in other settings, and it's a real pet peeve of mine with him, not because precisely because he does know better.
Yeah.
I know with the amount of knowledge he has about history and the intellect that he has, he fully understands that distinction and that argument. That argument being that we are not a democracy, we are most distinctly and overtly a constitutional republic. And there's a huge difference. There are myriad quotes by the founders that demonstrate their thinking on that. And I've always noticed that from him, but the other night his delivery was almost an exposition on democracy, and he seems to be saying exactly the thing about it that I object to, that it is not just an expression of the will of the people. That's not the only defining metric for a fair and just society. But that seems to be his argument, and I think you're probably going to
I do.
play the video.
I just happen to have that clip. So, Brittany, if you'll bring up that clip, this is what Tucker had to say. Now, in my mind, it's very low-key and very insidious. And I say insidious because when people talk about these things and know better, that's the only thing I can derive from that.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you, and I'm not, I know sometimes, we can quibble about details of something, but this is a big deal to me, and I understand people might say, well, why are you going after him on this? Well, normally because first of all, on this show, we frequently do endorse his comments, and so it's for that reason that I am incredulous that he doesn't understand this distinction. I know he does, and I would really like to understand his rationale for peddling his philosophical perspective in this way.
Same here. So, Brittany, if you'll roll that Tucker clip, please.
All of a sudden, pretty much every powerful person in the country is talking about something called democracy. Democracy! Our sacred democracy! You hear that word everywhere, from The Atlantic to NPR to the New Yorker magazine and NBC News in between. Democracy defines the year 2022 the way that Groovy defined 1968. All the cool kids are saying it. Liz Cheney has decided her life's mission is now to defend democracy. Jim Acosta has a new CNN show in which he uses the word democracy the way some people use prepositions, in every sentence. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, there's a Zoom webinar on democracy, which you're welcome to attend in case you haven't heard enough about it already. Every left of center midwit on Twitter will be there. All of them will be fretting about the future of democracy. But actually, if we're being honest about it, you should be a little worried about the state of our democracy. How is our democracy doing? Well, let's see. Another way to describe democracy is popular representation. That's a synonym. When the government does what citizens want it to do, you have a democracy. And when it doesn't, you don't. You no longer have a free country that is ruled by its people. So what kind of system do we have? It's easy to know. You find out what citizens care about, and then you compare those concerns to what the people who run the government say they care about. If you've got a functioning democracy, there should be a fairly precise overlap. In a democratic system, leaders try very hard to speak for their voters. That's the whole point of the government. So let's apply that test to the United States of America. What do our leaders care about? We know the answer because they tell us constantly. Our leaders care about equity and climate change. They care about trans rights, police brutality, the deadly insurrection of January 6th, mandatory vaccinations, more H-1B visas for Indian tech workers, and above all, at the moment, defending our closest ally, Ukraine, from Russian aggression. And of course, they care about third-wave academic feminism. That's deeply important to them.
I'm just fascinated by that statement, because really what he seems to be saying is that the function of the government in a just democratic society is to do the will of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, up to a point, you want the will of the people reflected in their own nation.
Right.
But he is leaving out the entire thing, the entire aspect of our society that makes it a functioning free society, and that's the Constitution.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that makes it a republic, okay? Constitution has democratic aspects to it.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if the people want their politicians to enslave half the population for some distinguishing characteristic?
That's
democracy.
The essence of a democracy.
Exactly.
51% decide what to impose on the 49.
Right. And that's right.
Simple as that.
And Tucker, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't either. Because I know he knows better. And I've noticed in other episodes of that show, he'll have somebody on there who will use the phrase constitutional republic, and he will immediately follow it and slip in the democracy phrase somewhere.
Yeah,
so
I don't know. That as well.
He's got, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't think he's a malevolent force. But I think in his mind there's some strategy for using that terminology. I think it's a mistake. I think anytime you use the language of the left to engage them in the arguments, you've already ceded territory.
Yep.
And so I always make a point to expressly disavow that term democracy when I'm having a discussion about these issues. And I think it's so important. That's fundamental. You can't, it's like they say the Eskimos have, 20 different words for snow. That's because it's such an important part of their lives. They have to, if you reduce them to only having one word to describe that phenomenon, they'd be in trouble. And we don't seem to have a very good civics vocabulary in this country.
No, we don't.
So everything's been narrowed down to grunts and clicks, about democracy, and I don't think anybody has any understanding about how this nation was founded, or what the founding principles are, or what the Constitution does, and how it secures their liberty.
They don't. And I grabbed a good article today, and in it the author writes, democracies are not structures in place to protect individual rights. And they are not. Mm-hmm. They care nothing about individual rights.
That's
Democracies are about the will of the majority.
That's right.
The will of the majority never comports with the will of the minority. That's
Five
for sure.
wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner.
And the founding fathers even had a lot to say about it. Thomas Jefferson said, a democracy is nothing more than mob rule where 51% can take away the rights of the other 49%. And John Adams says, whereas a republic is a government of laws. John Adams went on to say, a democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes itself, exhausts, and murders itself, because there never was a democracy that did not commit suicide. Now, that is a vital point.
That is an extremely and totally valid and vital point.
There never was a democracy that lasted.
That's right. That's right. And the founders understood that. They studied all of these things.
Yes.
I mean, human history is replete with all the different things that people have tried, and they put together a system that created accountability for the government by the people, or rather the other way around, of the government but by the people, okay, but not in a direct democratic fashion, because that is mob rule.
Exactly.
And frankly, it leads to socialism.
Yeah.
I mean, ask yourself why the left is so in love with the term democracy.
There you go.
They love that term.
There you go.
And they have to know, the ones who are a little bit more thoughtful, they have to know that they've won a huge battle when they've got some of the major conservative thinkers in this country, droning on about our democracy. Okay, completely playing into the language of their worldview.
That's exactly right.
It's really, it's upsetting to me when that happens, but the Tucker thing, I mean, to me, if I needed any more evidence that he does that on purpose, that little exposition that he did there,
I think so.
is in. I wish there were a way to get him to address it. I'm sure somebody else, I'm not the first person, you're not the first person
most assuredly.
So I bet his inboxes have been filled with people
Yeah.
saying, gee whiz, what are you doing? What are you saying?
Exactly.
So there's a reason.
Yeah. Well, the left loves arbitrary power.
Yes, they do.
That's why they love the whole
That's what
COVID
animates them.
lockdown thing.
That's
why
right.
they love the economic lockdowns, the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates. They love arbitrary power, and democracies provide government with that arbitrary power.
That's correct.
They allow the government to do whatever it wants to do as long as it's the will of the people.
Right, and you can always manipulate that by, having anybody with a pulse be allowed to vote.
There you go.
And appealing to baser impulses. I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, that's the whole problem with it as a governing mechanism.
It is.
It really ends up being driven by the emotions of people on hot button issues.
Exactly.
And so bad decisions get made.
Yeah.
And it always enriches the power of fundamentally bad people.
Yeah. And if you tend back toward this definition of democracy, doing the will of the people, if you look at the opinion polls on the Biden administration, it appears they're certainly not doing the will of the people.
Right.
Most people want liberty. They mistake that for freedom. I'm so tired of hearing people say freedom,
Right.
freedom of speech. It's not freedom of speech. It's freedom from oppression of speech or restriction of speech.
Right.
Read the Constitution. Read the Bill of Rights. It does not say you have the freedom to speak.
Right.
It says you have the right to free speech.
That's right.
Which means unencumbered by government arbitrary power.
That's right. That's right.
But speaking of arbitrary power, we see that exercised in some of the big tech companies. And I don't know if you are familiar with the Canadian convoy, the truckers convoy.
Yeah, that's been hard to miss.
Most people should be.
If you watch the news at all, it's hard to miss that.
Well, they raised $10 million
Right.
in donations. People freely giving. Now, these weren't taxes, they weren't forced, they were free donations that people said, yes, I'm sick of the mandates myself, let's support those truckers who are on the stage right now, voicing the popular opinion. And GoFundMe, which is a huge what do they call it, a funding source?
Crowdsource.
Crowdsource, that's
Right.
it, a crowdsource entity. They manage donations. Well, they charge ridiculous contribution fees.
Right.
I've given to a couple of causes on there, and it's ridiculous what they charge you to give money
Yeah,
for them
you're right.
simply to pass through that transaction. Well, the truckers raised $10 million, and now GoFundMe says, we're going to seize that money because we don't agree with the politics of what they're doing. We think they're violent and threatening, whereas, people burning down buildings and killing people in the street, that's not violent to GoFundMe because they certainly supported the CHOP zone.
Which is unbelievable.
They supported the BLM riots.
Right.
They didn't say anything about those. They supported all those.
Well,
but when truckers get together and they drive across the country in protest, that's just not right. We've got to seize that money and give it to other charities. Well, they've received a lot of pushback on that. Now, if it were me, if I were running the DOJ, there'd be an immediate investigation of that under the RICO statutes or some.
That's theft.
It's theft.
Right. False advertising and theft.
These people arbitrarily. Well, the thing about it costs. If you call your credit card company and say, cancel that transaction, it costs GoFundMe $15 per transaction canceled. So what they've done, they've said, we're going to give the money back to the people who donated it. Too late. Like the NFL like the NBA,
Right. Shot
like
their
so
wad,
many
yep.
so many sports, they're dead to me.
Well, absolutely.
Don't
Yeah.
ever ask me to
Yeah.
donate on a GoFundMe
Yeah, I won't
page
do
because
anything
I
to
will
GoFundMe
not.
ever.
I swore
Right.
off of them a long time ago when they were supporting BLM and
Right.
the Chop Zone and all these riots.
Well, in the Chop Zone, formerly Chaz, I guess they
Yeah,
decided to
Chaz,
rename
yeah.
their democracy. you
right,
know.
the will of the people,
Which
you know.
they were the consummate democracy.
Yes,
a
they were.
mob of people expressing their will in the form of direct action democracy. And in fact, one of the chants that the BLM Antifa crowd will shout in unison is, "This is what democracy looks like," when they're marching through.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're right.
Yes, they
That's the exact
Yes,
point
they
that we
are.
are trying to make here with this
Yes, they are.
discussion.
And I'm assuming that during the French Revolution, when they were carting people to the guillotine, they were shouting, chanting something similar.
Something
This
tantamount to
this
that
is
in
the will of the people.
in French, that's right.
Exactly. Well, Elon Musk, everyone knows Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Well, he calls GoFundMe professional thieves, and I would tend to agree with
Absolutely.
that.
Well, he's surprised to the upside a little bit lately, and
Yeah.
so happy to hear that one. And frankly, Spotify, I was happy to see, hasn't completely caved on the whole Joe Rogan thing. This is another example of the absolute power and the arbitrariness of it. I mean, I don't know what anybody knows about Joe Rogan. My first exposure to him was he was one of the characters on that old '90s news radio comedy sitcom, and then later he did Fear Factor, and now he has the most popular podcast in the country, garnering more views than the now completely failing CNN, okay, and most other media outlets as well. And I've listened to him and heard him talk. He is not a conservative by any stretch, but he's not a lunatic flaming liberal either. He's a thoughtful guy who likes to have discussions. And he's had a lot of these people on, okay, like Robert Malone and others talking about COVID and some of the science and the questions. Well, they tried to shut him down. I mean, they completely tried to shut him down, claiming he's peddling misinformation. And even if he is, so what? That has never been part of our national ethics here, that you tell somebody, oh, well, you're just peddling misinformation, so we're shutting you down. Okay, that is when people, I shy away from the phrase, "Oh, it's un-American," but that really is fundamentally un-American, whether it's the government or not. Unbelievable that these people are pushing this kind of approach to this discourse.
If that were the criteria, then CNN would have been shut down years ago.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. The Russia hoax and all the other nonsense.
The Russia hoax, and then you can even go back farther than that. During Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Bosnian War, they actually photoshopped photos adding explosions and fires and smoke in to make it look worse than it was.
Right.
They took pictures of an individual who had a genetic birth defect, and he looked emaciated, very, very skinny, ribs protruding, looked like he'd been starved.
Right.
They photographed him at a supposed
One of those,
POW camp. The truth came out. He was on the outside of the wire.
Yeah.
They went inside the camp to photograph him on the outside. Now that's CNN.
Yeah, CNN, right.
That's CNN. They have a long history. So anyone that believes CNN, you have a real problem. You like to be lied to.
Well, you do.
And I guess some people enjoy that.
I tuned in the other day randomly just to watch a few minutes of it, and I was shocked at the degree of just overt statements of assumption and opinion as direct fact.
As fact, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to purport to be the most objective person. I certainly have my own biases, as evidenced by these discussions. But I do have the ability to judge an objective report, and there's none of that on CNN. They are ridiculous figures on the media landscape, and I think that's finally becoming clear to people. I mean, I think they've canceled themselves at this point.
Well, I think so. Chris Cuomo's out. Zucker has been fired.
Jeff Zucker's had to resign, fired, and it looks like there's some way more going on there than just the affair of the two consenting adult 50-year-olds. I mean, that doesn't even raise an eyebrow in today's culture. So that's nonsense. That was the reason.
Absolutely, and that's what happens when you get these woke tyrants in positions of power, and in these high positions as Cuomo was in. They're corrupt.
They're corrupt.
They engage in systematic corruption.
Well, I think, you know, frankly, and I know this is ugly to say, but I think you almost have to have at least an incipient corrupt heart to go into politics to begin with.
Well,
so
yeah,
you know,
it appears that way.
It appears that way.
It appears that way.
It's bad because the fact that they ascend to that level, I'm automatically not going to like them.
Yeah.
You know, so there's very few politicians that I don't by definition, don't dislike.
Exactly. Well, I can't remember who the quote was from. They said, but anyone who has the wherewithal to get themselves elected president should, under no circumstances, be elected president.
Well, that's right.
It might have been Mark Twain, I'm not sure, but that's the truth. If you get to that point, you really shouldn't be in that position.
Well, it's like my favorite self-esteem joke. I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member.
You know, it's just the lunacy out there right now. It's beyond belief. It really is.
It is.
We have the DOJ targeting parents. You know, we have suspected terrorists coming across the southern border. They just caught 5 Syrians the other day. We have people coming across the southern border from, 19 different nations, 20 nations?
Well, consider this. Okay. They're telling children in schools, like in Loudoun County, for example, you are trespassing and will be subject to penalties and misdemeanor charges. But if you're an illegal alien, and that's the phrase I'm using, you can come across the border without a mask and get a free plane ride to a city in the United States, and there's no consideration whatsoever.
No consideration whatsoever.
And no penalty or sanction whatsoever. Yet a 10-year-old child who doesn't want to wear a mask in a school that his parents are paying taxes for him to attend is treated like some kind of criminal. And I believe there was a tweet recently by one of these school officials referring to them as S-heads. You can identify the S-head kids by the fact that they're not wearing masks.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I mean that's who we are being governed by, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you what, the inmates are running the asylum.
Right.
And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about something that the mainstream media is shying away from, and that's the fact that the lockdowns did absolutely no good and lots of harm. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is John Woodruff with Premier Equipment Company of Rocky Mountain Infield. Been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately. You've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers, everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away.
Alan Jackson has become a part of America's musical landscape and a country music icon. A very personal release entitled Precious Memories.
I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my fame and glory. Are you ours? In the blood.
Filmed live at the historic Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee, this unique DVD captures powerful gospel performances and intimate interviews with Alan, his mother, and his wife as he reflects on his musical journey.
This is my story. This is my song.
If you call now to order this inspirational video, you'll also receive, as a very special bonus, a 2 CD collection featuring 28 classic gospel favorites.
Love lifted me. Love lifted me. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. He lives, he lives, Christ Jesus lives today.
This DVD keepsake is a priceless addition to any music collection, and it can be yours along with this bonus 2 CD collection for the special low price of $29.95 plus shipping and handling. To order, have your credit card ready and call the number on your screen.
When we all get to heaven, what?
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back. And as I said, the mainstream media is completely ignoring the fact that Johns Hopkins University performed an analysis on lockdowns. And they have determined that they actually did more harm than good. And that example is reinforced by some of the foreign nations, the Scandinavian countries, who did not lock down, who did not put these idiotic restrictions on their people.
Most notably Sweden.
Most notably Sweden, and there were a couple others where the data.
I think Finland was one.
Yeah, Finland, and they went about their business as normal, and
of course they're kind of locked down all the time.
Well,
it's like 0 degrees even in July. I mean,
they're locked down by the weather.
I'm not sure that counts.
Well, yeah. But Johns Hopkins says that the lockdowns have had a negative effect not only on the economy but on individuals.
Right.
You know, the individuals have suffered immensely under this. The number of deaths is up, and we're going to get into that a little bit here with some insurance reports.
Okay.
But Johns Hopkins, that's a legitimate study.
And Johns Hopkins is a well-respected,
Absolutely.
not any bastion of right-wing thinking.
Absolutely.
I mean, I shouldn't have to say that, but I mean, it you know.
Yeah, well, that's right. They're definitely not in what I would call a conservative corner. But they say, it's contributed to reducing economic activity, raising unemployment, we know that.
Right.
Reducing schooling, causing political unrest, contributing to domestic violence, undermining, here we are, liberal democracy.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
We'll rephrase that to undermining the constitutional republic and the rule of law. These costs to society must be compared to the benefits of the lockdown, which in our meta-analysis have shown are marginal at best.
At best.
Well, you know, it's kind of like all these individuals who want to vaccinate their 5-year-old children, and Pfizer and Fauci and everyone else wanting to vaccinate these children. What's the net gain on that?
Yeah, it's incomprehensible to me.
You know, here, I've got the updated numbers on the age group 0 to 17.
Yeah, let's review those.
All right, that's children.
Yeah.
All right. And these are the individuals they want to stick in the arm with this unproven vaccine that does not prevent the disease. And this is true, you know, YouTube can censor us, whatever they want to do, but it's true, it does not prevent the disease.
And it's only a vaccine because they've redefined the word vaccine.
Exactly.
Officially redefined what a vaccine is.
All right, we've been in COVID for 25 months, 2 years and a month, according to CDC, because they track the data from the 1st of July 2020 through their latest update was the 29th of January. So that's 25 months. Now this is for 0 to 17 only. I didn't include 65, 75, 85. Didn't include any of that. This is just children, what I call children. 770 have died of COVID. All right, that's 25 months worth.
Right.
Okay, 25 months worth. Now, if you look at the all-causes deaths in that same period, 69,463 in that age group have died.
Right.
Of all causes.
Of all causes.
Of all causes. So, you know.
So out of that total number, what was that number?
The number was 69,463.
Right. So a little less than, or a little more than 700 out of that number were COVID deaths. The rest are other things.
The rest
I mean,
are
right
other
there,
things.
that puts it in perspective.
1,327 from regular old pneumonia.
Right.
All right. In that same period, about 3,600 have died of abuse and neglect.
Right.
That's roughly 1,800 every year.
Right.
Every year.
Right.
Roughly 1,800. 9,000 have drowned. 9,000. That's roughly 4,500 per year. Now, if you look at the all-causes deaths, of all ages. This is everyone. This is 0 to date of death. 7,010,796 people have died. That's 7,010,796 people. That's in that same 25-month period. That's roughly 3.3 million people a year in the United States only. Now, this is only the United States.
Right.
This is not globally. This is the United States.
Right.
So, 3.3 million people die every year. That's 276,000 a month.
Right.
That's roughly 9,000 per day.
Right. Now, those numbers sound big, but they're not, because the population is 350 million
Exactly.
people.
So,
Okay.
so when you talk about 770 children, 0 to 17,
That's almost a
dying of
rounding
COVID.
error.
Almost a rounding error. That's right.
Right.
It is beyond a level of. It is below a level of significance statistically.
Right, and so it's impossible for me to understand how a parent who has any ability
Yeah.
to process basic information, I'm not talking about, you've got to have some kind of math degree, I'm talking about just the ability to use fundamental human logic, okay? Why you would want to inject your child with a vaccine, quote unquote, that has not been proven, has very little benefit, seeing as how people in that age bracket don't get sick from this disease.
That's right.
And you
That's
don't know
right.
what the long-term ramifications of this vaccine are. Somebody like me or you, I can take it, and probably if it does have a negative effect, it doesn't matter. I've only got a certain number of years left.
And plus, you're not in the developmental growth stages.
That's exactly. That's
where,
exactly right.
where your body's rapidly changing over time.
Now, frankly, I've chosen not to take the vaccine because I just don't. I have made the decision that I think that I'm likely to be. I would probably fare okay with a COVID infection, especially an Omicron. And at this point, in the game, why would I do it now?
Exactly.
Why you would want to subject your child to something like that is completely unnecessary.
That I don't know, or a mask.
Well, the mask thing is incomprehensible.
It really is. And speaking of these numbers, now we all know that insurance companies are masters at analyzing numbers.
That's correct.
They are, everybody's heard of actuarial tables.
Right.
Well, that's where they take these numbers and they make them make sense as far as the likelihood of you having an accident. That's why your insurance rates are adjusted.
Right.
The potential for you to die under life insurance.
Fundamentally, anything that might enhance the likelihood that you or your beneficiaries would file a claim.
Exactly.
That's what guides their thinking
That's exactly
and their
right.
rather sophisticated analysis.
Now, what they've come to find is that what we're talking about here, the number of COVID deaths, they see a demonstrable impact to their bottom line, but not just from COVID deaths. All right. They're seeing an impact far beyond just the COVID deaths that they're claiming in this country. What, 800,000? They're seeing an effect far beyond that. What they're seeing are effects from vaccine deaths, from lockdown deaths, from all of these things that have been inflicted on this society. The insurance companies are saying, yeah, we're seeing our number of claims go way up.
Right.
Now, that's not something that can easily be disregarded.
No, it can't be easily disregarded, but it can be not reported on.
Well,
You ask the average person what they know about that aspect.
They know nothing about it.
Look, when they poll certain people, especially people who lean and vote for Democrats, they think that a person who gets COVID has a 50% chance of ending up in the hospital.
Well, we have a Supreme Court justice who says there's 100,000 children on ventilators right now across this country.
That one, yeah.
Yeah.
None of these people are inspiring confidence.
No, they are not.
I
They
think
are not.
It just continues to make me realize a lot of these folks are grifters.
They certainly
Grifters in
are.
academia. The
They
whole
certainly
academic
are.
profession is largely becoming a profession of grifters.
Yes.
And politics is a grifter profession now. Yeah.
Yeah. So between the Johns Hopkins report and the insurance companies' reports, I think that's some pretty credible information that this nation has taken the absolute incorrect response to this virus.
Right, and it's been highly destructive.
Highly destructive.
And unfortunately, I worry that the fallout the worst is yet to come.
Well,
Possibly.
it concerns me as well.
I don't know that. I mean, we tend to get mired down in that kind of thinking.
Right.
But, you don't know what would have been. And it's kind of like the hit that we took after 9/11. All the security state that was erected, the Patriot Act, and the nonsense at the airports, all the hit to the GDP that came. We don't know what we would have produced without all those costs. It's like the whole broken window theory of economics. So I think these COVID lockdowns and the whole methodology, methodology that we've used nationally to address this thing, highly destructive and somewhat exploited, if not outright exploited.
I lean toward the outright exploitation
for other purposes.
Yeah, because this is a gifting of arbitrary power to those who lust for arbitrary power.
And no better piece of evidence do you need than the way people are behaving over these masks.
Yeah.
I mean, the masks have demonstrably been. First of all, anybody with any common sense knew that they didn't do anything anyway. The health authorities told us that at the outset.
Yeah.
Anthony Fauci famously said, "Don't use a mask."
That's right.
Okay, it doesn't do you any good. Okay, and then later, well, I wanted to make sure that
they had enough for the healthcare workers.
Right. Well, so you're a liar, and we don't know what to believe. But the point is that they don't work. The whole size is huge. I mean, everybody knows they don't work. And yet you got these people that are screaming at the top of their lungs at people for not wearing masks, and they're imposing it on these children in schools, and they're just acting completely irrationally about it.
Yeah.
And that's because it has nothing to do with the actual purported function of the mask. It's a form of social control.
Social control, that's exactly right. It's arbitrary power in the hands of those who love arbitrary power.
Love arbitrary power, and I think, at the risk of getting into a little Dr. Phil here, I think those people frequently haven't had any power in their lives of any kind, whether it be over their jobs or their relationships or anything. And boy, this really gives them something to latch on to.
Well, I think we're seeing that.
Barney Fife mentality.
Exactly. I think we see a lot of that on local levels, with school boards.
That's what I'm
teachers.
talking about. Those people in particular. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. They seize on that and just love it.
Right.
Speaking of arbitrary power and politics and all of that, I was listening to the radio the other day, and the commentators on the left and the right continually talk about Joe Biden having run as a moderate.
Right.
And they're just shocked that he's moving left of center. Well, I don't know what they read
or watched
or listened to before the election, but in my mind, Joe Biden never ran as a moderate.
Never.
There was nothing moderate about his campaign. He would not refuse, or he refused to answer the question about packing the courts.
That's what I was just ruminating over. Absolutely. I was thinking about that very thing.
And packing the Supreme Court is done for one reason and one reason alone: to force democracy down your throat.
That's right.
That's what that's for.
That's
to force
right.
democracy down your throat. It just, I don't know why they continue to do that. He was running as a moderate.
Well, again, I mean, this may be an all-encompassing and simplistic theory. It's like in the old days when they didn't understand a lot of disease, they called it the fever.
Right.
But I just think that most of these people are grifters. They got these jobs. Yeah. There's a political class. There's a reporter journalism class, and they're all sort of in that bubble in Washington D.C. And nobody wants to really go out on a limb and state what's going on. And Joe Biden clearly, to the extent that he ran as anything, he just ran as somebody who wouldn't state his position.
Right.
Okay, as you pointed out,
in many cases,
when confronted about packing the court, he hemmed and hawed and kind of left it on the table a little bit. When asked about fracking and fossil fuels, I'm sorry, nobody watching that should be surprised that he's come out with these, because he was clearly appeasing the far base, the far left of his base, and was making promises to them. Everybody knew what was going to happen. Why these people are acting surprised? Well, they're acting because they're not surprised.
Right, they are not surprised.
They're not surprised, and they abetted it in many cases. But they're trying to save a little face now, because I think there's some pushback, and I think people are starting to realize that, look, every one of you people up there talking about these things, politicians on through to the reporters and the well-established historical press in this country, are liars.
Yeah.
Big-time liars.
Yeah, you know, just speaking about refusing to answer questions. I was watching a congressional hearing for judges, and Ted Cruz was asking this individual, I forget her name, but he was asking her to explain her position on targeted discrimination against Asians at the university level.
Right.
That they're being systematically targeted for discrimination because they feel that if they don't discriminate against them and block their admission to the universities, that they'll take over, that that's all they'll have.
Right. She was defending the policies of what I remember reading about. They called it race norming.
Exactly.
Okay, and they would basically put a handicap on Asian SAT scores because they perform well on the SAT and on IQ tests in general, and so they would penalize them for it.
Absolutely. Now, her response to Senator Cruz, when he asked her a question that he read from her article.
Right, the thing that she had written.
She had written it. She said, well, I can't answer that because I haven't read that.
Right, right.
And he came back and he said, well, you wrote it.
Right.
Did you not prepare for this hearing? And she said, well, yes, I did read over it, but you know, that was a perspective years ago, and I can't really say, I don't know the full context. And, you know, to me, if I were in Congress, here's the thing. Piece of legislation lands on my desk, I read it until the first unconstitutional provision.
And then thinking, right, well, that's why Ron Paul was known as
Dr. No.
Dr. No, because that's kind of what his methodology was. And the minute he ran into that first deal breaker, that was it.
And same thing with these hearings.
Right.
If a nominee refused to answer a question,
well, you know,
I would have to vote no. I'm sorry.
And I know we're running along here, but you know, they were talking to, and I think her name is Sarah Bloom Raskin this week for one of the Federal Reserve positions. Well, they were characterizing her responses as the greatest example of confirmation conversion they had ever seen, because she was making directly contradictory statements of things that she had written in the very recent past about the Federal Reserve's role in manipulating climate policy. That's what she wants to do, and that's what she will do if confirmed. Hope she gets, call your representative. She's a bad egg.
Raskin.
Right, right. I think it's Sarah, but it's definitely something Bloom Raskin. She's the wife of one of the House managers of the Trump impeachment, one of the Congressmen Raskin. Yeah, bad news. See if we can get her derailed.
Yeah, she wants to defund fossil fuel industries and industries that depend on fossil fuel. What is that?
And use the Federal Reserve to dictate who is allowed to get a loan and who isn't through the banks, what companies and so forth.
Well, she's no better than the Saul Omarova, the devout communist. And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Whoopi Goldberg.
Whoopi!
Woohoo! Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is Nicholas Bellamy at Premier Equipment. I'm going to talk about the 4540 Mahindra. It's 38 horsepower, full-cylinder engine. The weight of this tractor is 4,000 pounds. This tractor is perfect for bush hogging, distance, small garden, a hunting club tractor. Comes with a 7-year warranty, 2-year bumper-to-bumper, additional 5-year on the powertrain. You can have this tractor for $200 a month, and we have 20 of these tractors in stock. Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
You rip and tear your old statements and bills, but thieves use this information to steal your identity. Don't be a victim. Get the ID Police, the new ink roller that encrypts all your old documents. So before you throw it out, just roll it on, and your information is gone, both on the front and through the back. Even if the paper is held up to the light, even your medical information is safe with the ID Police. So block it out before you throw it out. Order now and get your ID Police for as low as $9.99 and get free shipping too. This offer is not available on Amazon, so call or click now to get your ID Police for as low as $9.99 with free shipping. Order now.
Call 1-800-903-8865. That's 1-800-903-8865. Or visit getidpolice.com. So call 1-800-903-8865 now.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
We're back, and as we said, now you might have heard this, and people that watch View should have seen this,
right.
although I don't know that the View's viewership is any greater than CNN. I really don't know.
Hard to know why anybody watches The View. It's not like we're in the days of, four TV channels.
That's a real good question.
Lots of other things to choose from.
Now, I have to admit, I've watched a few minutes here and there of The View, but typically that was when I was sitting in a waiting room and had no choice because I couldn't change the channel. Didn't do it voluntarily. Now, Karen Elaine Johnson has come out and suddenly rewritten the history of the Holocaust. Now, if you don't know who Karen Elaine Johnson is, she is one of the talking heads on The View. She is better known as Whoopi Goldberg.
Which, in all candor, I've heretofore, I've always found her the least offensive of the liberals on the panel. I mean, next to Joy Behar, she seems like a voice of reason sometimes, or at least rational thinking.
Occasionally, yeah. But in this case, she went off the beam and said that there was no racial component to the attempt to eradicate the Jews by the Hitler regime.
Right, the so-called final solution, the Holocaust.
Final solution, get rid of the Jews. She says, oh no, that wasn't racial at all.
It was just man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and this is what she says. These are two groups of white people. This is the version of the Holocaust that Goldberg and her cohorts agreed children should be taught. A butchered, ahistorical, Americanized, watered down, downright incorrect version of the Holocaust in which white people were being, I guess, unkind toward one another.
Right.
Now,
well, there's a lot to unpack here and to ridicule as well.
Yeah.
But I think at the root of it, well, first of all, I think it's ironic that she has appropriated a typically a Jewish name.
Yes.
Okay.
And she claims to be an American Jew.
Well, really?
Yeah.
I mean,
in
religiously, obviously.
her bio, yeah.
Right.
I was looking in her bio. She claims to be of the Jewish faith.
Yeah. So, okay. Well. Then wow, that even makes it even that much more shocking that she would come to her conclusions about the nature of the Holocaust.
I don't understand.
It was unequivocally a racially driven
Absolutely
thing.
was. In fact, as far back as 1919, Hitler issued statements in which he defined Jews as a race.
Right. And really, how insulting just to characterize it as two groups of white people. That's like saying, well, there's a difference between Chinese and Japanese.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not true. I mean, Jews have a very distinctive religious, cultural, and ethnic history.
They do.
Okay, that goes back centuries, and they've been persecuted. Okay, throughout those centuries, and in fact, and this may, I don't know, maybe I'm stepping out on a limb here, but I've always marveled at the fact that we hear about the legacy of slavery and how that's damaged the psyche of modern African Americans and blacks in this country. Well, it's always struck me that the Jews, they were treated, I mean, they weren't even worthy of slavery. The objective there was to eliminate them from existence, to actually exterminate them in an industrial scale murder factories.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, Hitler called them a race tuberculosis of people.
Right.
That's what Hitler said.
Right. So the fact that was perpetrated upon them in a more recent era, okay, than the slave trade in this country, yet somehow it's not my personal experience. I don't think people agree with it. I mean, the Jewish people seem to do quite well. Okay, they function very well in this economy, and they do very well without being burdened by apparently the legacy of. Now they do spend a lot of time making sure that history is not forgotten.
Oh, and I can't blame them for that.
But they don't seem to want to blame it for any deficiencies that they exhibit societally now. And so that's just always struck me as a dichotomy and a little bit of a contradiction. And that's what, but see, Whoopi Goldberg, if you actually dig into what she's really saying is, well, racism is only possible when it's white people directed at non-white people.
Right.
You can't have an act of racial animus between two different groups of fundamentally white people. Well, that's wrong-headed, and that's absolutely incorrect. And the Holocaust is one of the worst examples of what can come out of that kind of thinking.
Well, you know, she's this whole notion of equity stems from that kind of thinking.
Right.
That it's not racism if it's not a white person doing it.
Right.
You know, we can discriminate. We can push this so-called equity, and we can promote people based on their race, just like Joe Biden is doing with a black woman for Supreme Court.
Right.
That's racially motivated, and that, to me, that's a violation of the law.
That's right.
When you determine eligibility for a position based upon race, is that not racism?
Well, I think it's illegal. I don't see how he can, make that statement. And frankly, it also demonstrates stupidity. Why didn't he just nominate a black woman if that's what he wants to do?
Yeah.
You don't have to say, okay, I'm doing it because she's black, which is what he did. He should just say, look, I think this is the most qualified person here.
Now, if that had been the case, I could accept that.
Right, I
don't have a problem
because
with that.
First of all, like I pointed out before, it doesn't matter who he nominates, he's going to be a communist.
Right, well, this is true.
So, I mean, I could care less who he nominates. There's not a single person that he would nominate that I would approve of. It doesn't matter what their race is. So, that's a non-factor as far as I'm concerned.
One of the fallacies that's been spouted lately by numerous individuals is that the Supreme Court should reflect the face of America.
Yeah.
So we have to balance it racially based on ethnic proportions in America. Well, that's a lie. The court has nothing to do with that. The court has a single solitary function.
That's right.
And that's to determine if something meets the standards of the U.S. Constitution.
Right. Is it constitutional?
Period.
That's right.
Period. It has no other function.
And I don't think people realize, just because something is ruled unconstitutional, it doesn't mean it can't be implemented through law. You simply have to have your legislators, and that's where the will of the people is expressed. Ultimately, if you want something done, you can work it through your state legislatures and your elected representatives, and you can craft law that does meet the constitutional test. And oftentimes, the only reason something is unconstitutional is because it was done by fiat, by executive order, by poorly
by someone
crafted.
who did not have authority to do it.
A regulation. Half of what we have to abide by in this country right now are regulations promulgated by people who weren't elected by anybody. Okay, how is that democratic, folks?
Yeah, exactly. Fiats. But anyway, all of those things, we need to be aware of those things.
Need to be aware
People
of those
need to be acutely aware of those things. When you send your kids to college, is their entrance being skewed by some of these idiotic policies being put in place by
certainly
by universities and colleges? So, merit doesn't matter anymore. It's all about your color.
Right.
That's outrageous.
That is outrageous.
That's outrageous.
Well, I just think that they've tried to turn again. It gets back to Orwell and the way that they've really changed the language.
Yeah.
That's why I get so exercised about this democracy thing, because they really are. This is just like in 1984 when the Newspeak dictionary would get updated and words would have the meanings completely changed to the exact opposite of what they mean. War is peace. Love is hate. Okay, it seems like we're in that world right now.
We are. We absolutely are, because Webster's has changed definitions on
many of them
in the spur of the moment,
on the fly.
The CDC has changed definitions.
Right.
Fauci's fond of doing that. A viewer just sent me a note here, a text. Said The View averaged 2.2 million viewers total. All right. Joe Rogan has 10 million.
Right.
And he's just a podcast.
Just a podcast.
Just a podcast. He's not promoted by some huge network.
That's part of what animates all this contempt for Joe Rogan. Is that
he's just an average guy.
And if you watch him, to me, the really disheartening part is that nothing that he is doing is in any way out of the the realm of what we've witnessed our whole lives. People, I mean, I've seen plenty of interviews. I used to watch Charlie Rose on PBS tonight. He'd have these obscure, directors or scientists, and they would discuss all these issues. And I promise you, many of those discussions fell outside of, or in some ways fell outside of the mainstream. Not much, because Charlie Rose is a big doggone liberal. But it was usually a discussion that was pushing a left-wing concept that would fall way out of the mainstream. Nobody got accused of disinformation, and there was plenty of it, misinformation and disinformation. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you listen to Joe Rogan; he's not peddling a particular approach. He's saying, "Look, I have these questions, and I'm having these credentialed people on who have some experience with this, and I'm asking them what they think about it." I mean, Robert Malone is a physician who actually was an inventor of the mRNA technology used to create these vaccines. And he has his opinions about them, and they're not favorable. Okay,
Right.
We're not allowed to hear those opinions. Okay, and Joe Rogan's not allowed to have a platform through the internet. It's not even a TV show. A platform through the internet, through the web, to discuss. Have a discussion with him or some of these other individuals without having it be labeled. And you got Jen Psaki up there calling for more censorship.
Calling
for these big tech companies to impose more censorship. That's the essence of fascism, folks.
You better believe it.
The government, in cooperation with big corporations, most notably big tech, Google, Facebook, Spotify, those types, to implement policy or to quell opinions or speech.
Opposing opinion.
Opposing opinions. That's exactly right. So that's another one of those words that has this loose definition. But fascism is always historically, it's fundamentally it's what amounts to public-private partnership.
Well, if people want to fix this, simply eliminate the exclusion that big tech receives under the FTC. Section, 203? 230. Section 230. Eliminate the exemption that they receive. Allow people to sue them for infringement of rights.
That's right.
First Amendment rights. And those problems will quickly resolve themselves. But no politician wants to pick up that mantle. They're all scared to death of that.
And I guess it's because they get so many donations from these people.
Well,
that's part of
look at Zuckerberg, $400,000 to influence the vote.
$400 million.
$400 million. I'm sorry, $400 million to influence the last election.
In the 2020 election.
Now that should be criminal. That's what DOJ should be looking at.
Well, especially the way he did it, which is to get into using hand-picked people to Democrat-leaning individuals to go into official positions
local boards of elections.
Local boards of elections, right.
Outrageous, and we have, that's not the only interference with elections. I mean, we have the Supreme Court of North Carolina interfering in elections right now by one judge deciding that, well, I don't like the way the Republicans are drawing up the districts here.
Right.
There's a solution for that too, folks. Draw a perfectly geometric
a grid.
That's right. Grid the section off. Some sections would be larger, some would be smaller to get the population, because these districts are proportioned by population.
Right.
So you just have bigger squares and a little smaller squares.
Would suit me.
Maybe some rectangles.
Yep.
But get rid of these darn districts where they look like a darn amoeba.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Or a string,
Or a string, yeah. But we have one judge deciding that, oh, I don't like that because I'm a Democrat. Now, judges are supposed to be impartial. Right. They're not supposed to be partisan.
Well,
the Supreme Court is not supposed to be partisan.
Well, the invidious thing here is that that's happening in Republican-run states. They're disallowing, they're gerrymandering, but in all the blue states, they have cemented these things, and they've created conditions where very, very difficult for Republicans to win ever in the future.
New York, I believe, is I can't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere in 22 to 4. 22 liberal Democrat locked in districts to 4 that a conservative possibly could win.
Right.
Is that fair?
Right. It is not. It's all manipulation.
They used to say, never trust anyone over 30. That was in the hippie days.
I'm aware of that.
Well, my opinion is never trust anyone in the media and never trust anyone in politics.
I'm with you on that.
And with that, we're out of time. I've enjoyed it. Hope you have.
Likewise.
We will be back next Saturday for more American Danger. I'm Robert Crescione.
I'm John Gatsis.
Have a great week. Good night.